Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's Pest Control Product Compliance webinar with Health Canada. My name is Adam Brome, and I'm a Communications and Events Coordinator with SARM. We'll start off today's session, as always, with a few quick notes regarding the webinar platform and the session format. We will then transition into the main presentation, which will take up most of today's session, but there will be a few moments at the end for some Q&As. This webinar will be recorded, and a copy of the recording will be available to view on our webinar's webpage following today's event. Please let us know if you're experiencing any technical difficulties during today's webinar through the chat. The chat can be accessed by clicking on the comment bubble icon on your screen. The chat is visible to all webinar participants and presenters, and it's where you can submit any of your questions that you have for the Q&A session. All questions will be answered following today's presentation, and if we do run out of time prior to your question being answered, we will follow up with you offline with an answer. And a copy of today's presentation and the session recording will be distributed to all attendees following the webinar. Our presenter today is Pat Luchenski. She grew up on a farm just north of Regina, which is where she and her family have lived for 30-ish years. Pat graduated from the University of Saskatchewan with a degree in agriculture. After graduation, she worked for dairy producers in Regina, where she gained experience in lab work as a lab supervisor, a quality control manager, and finally in a member services position working with dairy farmers. When the dairy closed, she then worked as a quality control manager in the plastic industry, plastic pack industries, Regina and Newport News, Virginia, where they manufactured dairy and deli containers. She currently works for Health Canada as a regional pesticides officer, where she's been working for about 12 years. So with saying that, I'll now hand it over to Pat for her presentation.
All right, good morning, everyone. Thank you for attending on a why is winter such a difficult thing to accept, that it just drops and stays. But I appreciate you taking the opportunity to sit on the presentation this morning. I probably should have made it a catchier title for the presentation, but as we're going through it, if you feel you have neighboring RM offices that might benefit from it, please let them know, because as we get into the presentation, you'll kind of understand why it's important for all the RMS offices to understand what their obligations are as stakeholders. So I'll touch base on that. You are a stakeholder, which means you fall under Federal Pest Control Product Act and regulation. As administrators, I'm always marveled at how much work you guys do and different things that you do. And I know rodenticides are probably the least of what you worry about on a day-to-day basis. But because you're stewards of a rat and mouse program and you distribute probably 90% of the rodenticides in the province, you are considered stakeholders to us. So it's important that everybody know what their obligations are as a stakeholder. So I'm going to get into the presentation, save all your questions to the end, I guess, and we'll just get moving here. So presentation overview, I want to touch base on what a pest is, what a pesticide is, the role of Health Canada. I am part of a national pesticide compliance program, and we do inspections throughout Canada. So I want to touch base on the inspection results of RM and county offices this summer, which are complete and rolled up. And what I want to give you an idea what to expect when you are being inspected, or whether we reach out to you to actually perform an inspection for you. I want to touch base on the label database and how to access information so you can check the registration status of rodenticides that you might have in inventory. A new database that we have is the Pesticide Product Information Database, and a couple of items that I want to review as a result of the inspections done this summer: storage of pesticides and personal protective equipment when you're handling pesticides. So getting into it, what is a pest? A pest is an animal, it's a plant, it's an organism. It can be an organic substance as a function of an animal or a plant. So a pest is a weed, a rodent, a fungus, a bug, an insect, a bird, a microorganism. So it's a huge variety of different types of pests. And what is a pesticide? A pesticide is not just a herbicide. Quite often when I go to trade shows, I'll be talking with a farmer, and you'll ask him if he uses pesticides, and he'll say, "No, I don't use any pesticides. I don't like use them." He instinctively infers that it's an insecticide. So it's part of the education that we do. A pesticide is a generic term for all of the different types of products: herbicides, insecticides, fungicides, rodenticides, swimming pool, flea and tick products, insect repellents. So as you can see, there's a huge variety of products and stakeholders that we regulate. So what's the role of Health Canada? Um, so my job is to enforce the Federal Pest Control Products Act and regulations. So Health Canada, under Health Canada, and I'll just explain a little bit in the next few slides, Pest Management Regulatory Agency, or PMRA, is responsible for registration of all the pest control products in Canada. It's a pre-market assessment system, so nothing goes onto the marketplace that isn't registered, and it has a 4 or 5-digit PCP number specific to that product. They are also responsible for reevaluation of registered products. Reevaluation is done every 15 years on every active ingredient. And they will determine if their product, an active ingredient, will remain registered, or whether there are mitigation measures that they need to put in place. And they work with the registrants, or the manufacturers in this case, to generate all the data and get the data that's required to support its continued registration. And I am part of Regional Operations and Enforcement Branch. I am responsible for verifying compliance of importers, manufacturers, distributors, exporters, users under the federal requirements. So my primary mandate, all of our Health Canada's primary mandate, is to protect human health and environment, and making sure that we assess products and have sustainable management practices. Um, The Pest Control Products Act provides authority for an inspector to enter any premises, examine any pesticide records, or request persons to produce documents. Our legislation is based on a regulation of product use, and everything that we do is embedded in the law. So Section 4.1 defines our role, and then the other 3 sections there are typical prohibitions that we would find. So contraventions that we would find regulating user sectors. So the first one is possession of unregistered pest control products. So whether it be EPA registered products, or products that are no longer registered. And then a lot of use with patterns inconsistent with the label. And we'll talk as we go on about the label and how important the label is to us. And then Section 6.8 addresses the human health and safety of the environment. So respect to possession, handling, distribution, storage. I want to talk a bit about acceptable risk. Acceptable risk means there is a reasonable certainty that no harm to future generations, health, and environment from the use or exposure of a pest control product when used as per the label directions. So registration is based on acceptable risk. There are always risks when using pesticides, which is why we stress everywhere, every time, the importance of actually reading the label and making sure that you're following the label directions. Regulation of pesticides in Canada are a shared responsibility. So there's a set of federal pest control product act and regulations. There's also a set of provincial or territorial, in this case, Saskatchewan Pest Control Product Act and regulations. And then there might also be municipal bylaws. So federally, again, PMRA is responsible for development and upkeep of the Act and regulations, the federal Act and regulations. They're responsible for registration and reevaluation. They do all their assessments based on human health and safety in mind. They assess environmental impact. Value assessment is the pesticide at a reasonable value, and does it provide adequate control when used in the marketplace. So they do a lot of value assessment as well when they're registering a pest control product. And if it's a new science, it can take up to 10 years to actually register a new active ingredient. So it does take a long time. They also consider what's going on in other parts of the world when they register products, and consider complaints and information gathered from other countries as well for registration of those products. And then at the bottom is compliance and enforcement, and that's where I come in. The province has heavier regulations when it comes to transportation, use, storage, and disposal. They're also responsible through SAS Poly for the training and certification and licensing of applicators and vendors in the province. They also look after spills and accidents, permits and use restrictions. And then they also have a compliance and enforcement component as well. So they have an investigator that works for the province as well. And we always work quite closely with them. Sometimes they have stronger regulations when dealing with certain complaints that we deal with. So we work quite closely with them. And then a municipal bylaw would be something like a cosmetic pesticide ban, where a city might choose to actually put in additional regulations to possibly prohibit the use of any kind of home and garden products in that town. You as a small town or RM may have additional bylaws that you put in place over and above what we would put in federally or provincially. So that's just an example of what a municipal bylaw might be. Okay, so a number of years ago, pesticide compliance program, which is where I work for, used to be under the same umbrella as PMRA. We are now separated out. So the pesticide compliance program is part of Regional Operations and Enforcement Branch, which includes inspectors from cannabis, product safety, tobacco, and product safety. So all the compliance officers are now out in a separate department and independent from PMRA. We rely quite heavily on PMRA because they set the standards. They have hopefully a lot of the answers. So if we reached out to them on an interpretation, they're able to help us do an interpretation. If it's a label interpretation or a use or anything like that, we reach out to them. But as a regional pesticide officer, I fall under the PCP program, and my responsibility is to enforce the Pest Control Products Act in regulations. And we do a lot of compliance work as well, a lot of education and outreach. So, which is why I've reached out to actually do this presentation to administrators, because again, you are a stakeholder and a regulated party. Okay. So just a bit about what I do on a day-to-day basis. So, or on an annual basis. Active prevention, targeted oversight, and rapid response. So fancy names for education, inspection work, and dealing with complaints. So active prevention is things like today. So doing presentations, workshops, doing articles, just having meetings with different stakeholders, updating them on things that are coming forward. If you ever see there's an opportunity in your area to have myself or a representative from Health Canada come and talk to people in your community, please reach out. We're more than happy to do these types of things or come on site and meet with your people or groups or organizations to talk to them about stuff. The probably 50% of my work is targeted oversight and 50% is dealing with complaints and inquiries. So targeted oversight for us would be registered inspections, non-ag inspections where we would actually do the pest control officers, landscape companies, industrial vegetation management companies, golf courses, and they change pretty much every year. We like to get around to see a variety of sectors every kind of 5 years and do inspection programs with those. Sometimes it's education, sometimes it's inspection work. Egg verification would be market gardens, fruit and vegetable growers would be an example. So we would go out and we might target like a cabbage grower or a potato grower and actually collect samples and make sure that they're actually using the right products on the right crop. So we do that on a regular basis and an annual basis. So rapid response, again, 50% of my time is probably spent dealing with inquiries, complaints, situations of non-compliance. A farmer on farmer drift, a farmer and acreage owner drift. We can get involved in a landlord and tenant dispute if there's an application that's being done for a bed bug or a cockroach or even a mouse. So we have a huge variety of stakeholders. We're also one of the only groups out of all of the ones that I mentioned, cannabis, tobacco, and product safety, that actually do inspection work with the end users. So the PCOs, the rat and mouse guys, users, the market gardeners, that the orchards, that type of thing. All the other ones basically stop at a retail level or a manufacturing level. So we're the only group. So it gets very complicated sometimes when you're inspecting a user with limited knowledge sometimes on how to access information and whatever, but it adds for an interesting workload for sure. Now I want to talk about the inspection work that was done this summer at the RM offices, which was the whole purpose of actually the presentation today. But I want to mention really quickly what to expect when Health Canada does an inspection. We educate. Our whole focus is to try and educate. The more we educate, the less we have to enforce. So that's our whole kind of uh, purpose and kind of structure and how we look at things. Just so that you know, we have a pretty good set of powers of inspectors in the Act. Um, and we're able to enact those. And keep in mind that when it comes to the RM offices, you guys are another government body. You have always been very compliant and very open with discussing things with us. The set of inspectors' powers probably become more important when we're dealing with somebody like, selling a non-registered pesticide in a mason jar out of the back of a van. That's when we need higher powers of inspectors to be enacted in order to deal with certain situations. Or if, for example, a uh, someone who's received a compliance order isn't complying with the compliance order to correct their behavior, we need higher levels of enforcement. So in all honesty, your RM offices have been super great at letting us in and providing us information, right? And I hope that we continue with this relationship moving forward. So an inspection can be announced or it can be scheduled. I'm right now the only inspector in the province. So if I'm going to drive 4 hours to do a grouping of RM offices for inspections, I'm going to call ahead. That's not always the case. Sometimes we do unannounced, but in general, when I'm dealing with the RM offices, I will let you know because I don't want to drive that distance and not have you there. And really, you must grant access to enter. If you've got things going on like meetings and stuff, I don't want to show up on that date. I will try to work around your schedule as best we can. And it's a hopefully a cooperative relationship that we have. So we are required to identify ourselves with a certificate of designation. We are um, really a designate of the government of Canada to do the work that we do. So we do have badges, which at higher levels of enforcement, we actually have to produce that badge. Um, and really all we ask is that anybody at the place of the inspection give us reasonable assistance to open packages. If I'm in a warehouse and I need somebody to bring down a pallet of product, I'm not a forklift operator, so my expectations would be that company would provide me with that assistance to bring down that product. And it is illegal to obstruct or hinder or knowingly make false or misleading statements to an inspector. So all I can say is be open and honest. It would bode well for you if you're open and honest rather than trying to hide stuff, because it doesn't look good if we identify that there's false or misleading statements or information. So about our focus this year was on 2% liquid strychnine. Now, why did we do inspections this year in 2023? Even though all the inventory had been removed from the RMs, 2% or strychnine in general is a high profile pesticide. It's a restricted class pesticide, so it's higher on our radar. It's a politically charged pesticide because it is used for wolf and coyote skunk predation programs, specifically in Saskatchewan and Alberta. So it's not a traditional pesticide because there is no antidote and there's a high chance of a secondary kill depending on how it's used. So when it comes to the 2% liquid strychnine, the last day of permitted use was March the 4th of 2023. So continued possession or use of the product after that date would result in enforcement action by us if there was any need to take that action. And the responsibility of disposal costs of it would fall to likely you in the RM office to dispose of it. So the expectation is that when the call out was made last, I guess it'd be almost 2 years ago or last year, for the return of all the strychnine, is that every RMF office complied with it, and you're not holding on to any unregistered product because that would be a contravention. So the inspection work was to monitor the strychnine inventory in the marketplace. And I just have a link at the bottom here. If you have an opportunity, go on to the Government of Saskatchewan website. There's a good listing of products that are available in the marketplace to replace the 2% liquid strychnine. So it's a pretty good article. They haven't had a chance to update it and remove the strychnine, but it gives you some options in the marketplace. So yes, okay. So strychnine results for 2023. No RM offices were found in, okay, so inspections were done Alberta and Saskatchewan in the summer of 2023. They're all complete. Saskatchewan was 100% compliant in all the RM offices that I inspected for not having any strychnine in possession or storage. Now, I did not go into every room. I did not go into the shop. I basically asked the administrators whether they had possession and tried to get clarification, verification on what was returned and how much was returned. So all of you are 100% compliant. In Alberta, it was a slightly different situation. They have ag fieldmen at county offices that are the ones that kind of control the inventory of strychnine, and they have a different history than you guys do here in Saskatchewan. So Alberta was a slightly different situation and did have some that had possession of strychnine, older versions of strychnine. So they were issued warning letters and they are required to dispose of all their products based on provincial requirement. So in Saskatchewan, now I want to talk about, okay, for strychnine in Saskatchewan, you guys were great. No inventory. Again, I didn't go into every cubby hole in your business, but from what I identified, no issues with it. In Saskatchewan, however, you were 100% non-compliant at every RM office I inspected for either possession of unregistered pest control products or what we refer to as decanting of pesticides. I want to talk about PPE. That'll come up later as well, but I don't always take action on PPE because the label indicates you are required to wear specific PPE when you're handling it. And chemical resistant gloves are the easiest thing that you can do when you're handling your pesticides. But it's a personal choice. Even though the label is the law and it says that you have to wear chemical resistant gloves, you're making a choice as someone handling it not to wear the proper gloves or not to wear the personal protective equipment that you need when handling that product. So I did make notes of it in the letters, the warning letters that were issued. And we also do a presentation on aging and risk of using pesticides and the impact of not wearing PPE as we age. And it's quite an interesting presentation. And just dealing with an aging population of farmers or rat and mouse guys, it has a direct impact on them if they're not wearing their PPE and protecting themselves. So We also did a round of inspections in 2015 and 16. Very similar results: possession of unregistered pest control products and decanting. So now what I want to do is I want to go into some examples. So here is possession of unregistered pesticides. This is a contravention. Very common one to find is the Liquitox 2. Was a very popular product, and it is available, but it's a different PCP number. This particular one is unique. So if you look on this little bag here, the registration number is 23720, very specific to this product that is no longer registered. On the right side, so we run into expired products, products that are never registered, or possibly EPA registered products. So it would fall under, all of this would fall under the possession of unregistered pesticides. So on the right here is a sampling in one county office in Alberta of products that are no longer registered, or maybe they have never been registered. There's a little vacutainer bottle here containing strychnine from an old coyote or wolf baiting program that they had years ago. So in this case, the egg fieldmen, because they control all this stuff, are responsible now for disposing of it and making sure that they get rid of it out of their inventory. So another contravention is what we call decanting. It's putting bait blocks into paper or plastic bags and handing it to your ratepayer. Now, I want you to think about the concern for the liability to the RM office by decanting it as we move forward here. So here's an example, a couple of pictures, and I'm not going to point out any RMs at all, but this is a contravention. Decanting is a contravention of the Act. And I have to point out the obvious, that these are two food containers, typical food containers, a plastic food container and a Ziploc bag. So it's not in the original container. So when it comes to the label is the law. The label for every pesticide says it must be sold and distributed in the original container. So it's improperly labeled as per our Act and regulation, and repacking of pesticides like this makes you a registrant. So you would have to be a legal registrant with PMRA in order to package, repack, and distribute this product. So definitely non-compliant. Here's another one. Unfortunately, the 5-gallon pail doesn't match the place pack, but this one happened to be for blocks, but it's a Raymit product. So there's 150 bags in this pail, and often an RM would take it out of the pail and put it into a Ziploc bag, hand it over to the ratepayer. This is definite contravention, and I'm going to point out something on the place pack. The outer packaging is, of course, the pail. Therefore, it has to be distributed in that pail. So in this case, the place pack itself says, read the label and the outer packaging before using. And there's also another instruction here down in the bottom right corner that says, read the full panel. So there are absolutely no baiting instructions on this bag. All the baiting instructions are on this panel here. So again, it becomes a contravention by pulling it out of the pail and distributing it. Yes. What else was I going to say? So on this label here, this is what we would refer to as the principal panel on the Ramic place pack. And on the pail, it's the secondary panel. And the secondary panel has all the use, all the PPE, all the baiting instructions that the user has to have. So if you're selling or you're distributing it in a plastic container or a Ziploc bag, there are no use requirements, which means you're a registrant, and now the user has no use instructions when you send it home with them like that. Okay, here's another example. The Resolve baits, I know, have become popular over the last number of years. Again, the same thing. On the outside of the package, on the pail, is the principal panel. And I can't remember if this one has a package, a brochure on the inside, or whether there's a secondary panel on the back of the pail. Either way, there isn't enough information on the little soft packs themselves. So this is also considered decanting. It has no use instructions on here. Now, I want to talk about, because this also came up, the SARM rat and mouse bait is going through a bit of a transition with a new manufacturer. SARM themselves has, of course, gotten out of the manufacturing or registrant holder of this product. So you would have seen information coming from SARM in the last number of months about a new supplier. So the one thing that was done right with this product, so there's 24 bags of 454 grams per box. The good thing about this, and it all comes down to the labeling. This one is in fact compliant when you pull out the bags and give those bags to the producer or the ratepayer. So this is a principal panel on here with both the English and the French. And on the bag itself is a secondary panel, and it has both English and French, and it is hard to read. So I've been in touch with the new manufacturer about, his moving forward into whatever new packaging he wants. But at the end of the day, you are compliant in distributing this to your ratepayers one at a time. So I noticed, Adam, there are some questions that are coming up. I don't know if we want to take them now or hang on. So at the end of the day, this one is compliant. SARM, along with Maxim at the time, did this right. And I will want to point out on the label, it says, read the bag label before using. So all of the required information found on the box, or all the required information for baiting, is actually found on the bag. So for us, the label is the law and it's an enforceable document. But in this case, the labeling was done to make the way that you distribute this compliant. So, okay, I will just keep going. If you could hold your questions to the end, I would appreciate that. I'm trying to get through it so we actually have some time here to be able to go through some questions. So recap of the inspection work. The presentation today is the first step forward to our RM administrators and your council to actually address, expired PCPs and decanting issues. And know that because you have been such a high rate of non-compliance, our inspection work will continue with your group. So anybody who has had an inspection from me, there's a chance that I might come back and do a surveillance inspection to just make sure that you've corrected your behavior. So all we really want out of this is open dialogue, open discussion, and make sure that you correct your behavior. So anybody who, we did verbal education on site and following the inspection, and anybody who was non-compliant was issued a warning letter, an awkwardly worded warning letter, but basically your requirements to dispose of the product or to cease the practice of decanting, and it'll remain on file. And again, we prefer to educate rather than enforce, and our expectations are that you would actually address the problem. So nice to have so many people attend today. So hopefully you can take back the information I'm giving you today to address the non-compliances that were identified. So just a little bit on the enforcement tools. And again, consider, you guys have been very cooperative, but if we have to go to a higher level of enforcement, know that we have a lot of tools available to us. It's a case-by-case basis that we will always determine, like, what's the history of non-compliance, what's the degree of harm, what's the intent. Certainly all of the RM offices, your degree of harm, your intent, and your non-compliance history is pretty low, whereas the guy selling something out of the back of the van, it might be a higher risk, right? So a variety of tools are available: warning letter, voluntary removals. We have ability to seize and detain stuff. We can issue compliance orders. We can do monetary penalties, and rarely, but available to us, is also prosecutions. So just to give you an example of a prosecution, um, we would probably only issue an AMP if it was a very serious monetary penalty. So just giving you an example, we do post the bulletins online at Health Canada. Anybody can look at them, the last 5 years of bulletins or AMPs penalties that have been issued. And usually to get to that stage, they haven't complied with a compliance order or previous request to cease an activity. And a fine is dependent really on how serious it is. And most violations end up being very serious if we're going to take it to that step. So I'll just give you an example. In July of 2023, Health Canada issued 8 notices of violation to one company in Ontario for a total of $80,000 for an import company who was in continued possession of unregistered PCPs. He continued to distribute them, and he was also making false or misleading statements to an inspector regarding the identity of a pest control product. So we do address things, but it takes a while till we get to that stage. My anticipation is that an RMF office would never get to that level. So what do you need to do to stay in compliance? You're all stakeholders. You all support, you're all stewards of the rat and mouse program in the province. And again, you're the largest users of rodenticides. So you want to continue to be a steward for that particular program. And you guys hire your rat and mouse guys. It's a big program in this province. So we want you to be compliant, and we want it to be very publicly compliant as well, right? So really what you need to do is check your registration status of not necessarily the stuff that's coming in from your distributors on an annual basis, your blocks and that kind of thing. It's the stuff that's been stuffed into the back shelf of your shop or your storage unit that you don't know how long it's been there. Nobody's using it, nobody's taking it. That's the stuff that you need to look at. So moving forward, look at what you have in your office, look at what you have in your shop. So your foreman or your maintenance people, what have they got in their shop that needs to be looked after? There's a PCP number that's unique to every pesticide. That's the best way for you to source it, and I'll go through that as we get further on into the presentation. And stop the practice of decanting. Purchase and distribute in the original container. And what you really need to do is consider the liability on your RM office by doing that. And I will, so really it means you going back to the distributor to ask for smaller size packaging so that you can distribute in the container that was originally packaged in. Hold it for disposal. So if you identify that you've got product that's old, expired, and needs to be disposed of, the best process is through Clean Farms. Now, if you are doing your inventory, this is the week in southern Saskatchewan that Clean Farms is actually running a disposal program. So you have only 1 week in 3 years in which the southern part of Saskatchewan can dispose of any old expired PCPs. The northern Saskatchewan, I believe, is next year, so Davidson North, and then they take a year off. So every 3 years in the south or the north, with 1 year off in between. And again, as I mentioned, know that Health Canada will continue to do inspection work moving forward because of your high rate of non-compliance. So the unfortunate part of the work that we did is that we will be coming out and doing another round of inspections with you. So I want to talk about the label. The label is the law for us. Okay, the label is the law. It's a legal enforceable document. It's the result of the entire risk assessment that a company goes through to get a product registered. Read the label. That's all I can say. And it doesn't matter whether you're a farmer, because a lot of you maybe on the call have a farm business on the side, or your partner or whatever. You have to read the label. One of the things that I point out, which is quite obvious, is when you're putting on an insect repellent to a 2-year-old, do you read the label? Are you applying the right product for the right target group? The only place you're going to get that information is off the label. So the label gives you directions for use, PPE, the crop, the use site, the pest controlled, the rate, the timing, the equipment. It gives you first aid. It gives you what PPE is required. You have to read the label. Label is a bit of a misnomer. I just want to explain that on the jug here. So the label is an approved document between the manufacturer and PMRA. So PMRA approves the label that the manufacturer has to copycat and put onto the jug or the box or the tote or the 45-gallon drum, however, whatever form that pesticide takes. In a label, there will be a principal panel and a secondary panel. The principal panel is what we call the front-facing panel. If it was on a store shelf, this is what you would see. It's a specific name. It's got the PCP number on. It's got the guarantee. It's got a contact information. It's what you see on the front-facing panel on a store shelf, or when you pick the jug out of the box, or you're looking at the tote. There's also a secondary label, which is either a brochure or a booklet. It could be a fold out that's on a pesticide. But again, it's a legal document for us, and it provides the user with all the information that they need in order to use that product safely. It is not a safety data sheet. A safety data sheet is something completely different. It's for emergency response. A safety data sheet is. The label is what's on the product, tote, whatever. One of the problems that when farmers run into problems, if they're relying only on the crop production guide, if you look through the crop production guide, it will always say, read the label, read the label. The crop production guide doesn't give you specific information regarding REIs, PHIs, rain fast. Certain products do. Now, when you're looking at tank mixing products, two, three products, you need to be able to compare, say, for example, a return to entry interval. No, let's take a pre-harvest interval. If a pre-harvest interval is 3 days on one product and 5 days on another product and 7 days on another product, and you tank mixed it, you need to apply the strictest of those, which would be the 7 days. That's where farmers run into problem, because a lot of that information isn't in fact in the crop production guide. So read the label, make sure that you know what information needs to be accessed so that you can use the product safely. So I want to talk about how to access a copy of the label. We have a website and an app. We have 3 different systems in which you can use, and I'd like to touch base on all of them. And at the end of this, I do have some sheets, some search tips sheets, and some documents that I will be sending around. I'll send through Adam, and maybe he can send it out through SARM. But always read and follow the label. Routinely check for updated labels, because the reevaluation is every 15 years, and every label is updated every 5 years. So there are new things that come up. Companies change things. You need to know how to access a copy of the newest label. If you're getting new inventory in, chances are it's good. You don't have to worry about it. It's the old stuff that you've had around for a while. Ensure registration numbers are valid, right? Okay, so I'll show you how to do a search as we move forward here. So 2 systems. You can get a phone app, which you can go on to your Apple site or your Google Play and download a copy of the Health Canada Pest. Download the app to be able to access a copy of the label. It doesn't allow you to do too many detailed searches. whereas the desktop version allows you to do a little bit more in-depth searches. So if I'm a farmer out in the field and I just want to look at what my rain fastness is on a particular product, I can open a copy of the label and it'll show me right away. So getting into it. Again, I'll send you some handouts after. So the easiest way, and in this drop down here, you can access a label based on a company name, a product name, a PCP number, a CAS number, or you can also search based on active ingredient. I always find the easiest thing is know the PCP number, find it on the product, and enter it in as a registration number on this search. So as you go down, you enter in the PCP number, click enter, and it opens this screen. And on this screen here, you can either open the registration number, it's highlighted, or you can open the name of the product. Each one provides you different information. So the PCP number, it will open a copy of the label that's in the database. And if you open the name of the product, it actually shows you the registration status. So if I picked the PCP number, this is the very top part of the label that I've just opened. Here's the date of that label. It's on every label in this database. Registration status. So here's an example of the same product. I clicked on the registration status. So if you notice, there are 4 dates that could potentially be in here. There's only 2 of them. So what this tells me is this is continuing registration. So this is how you're going to check the registration status of all those old products that you want to check to see if they're still currently registered. So in this case, this product has continuing registration. Here's an example of one, which is the Liquitox, which is very common again. And in this case, there's 4 dates in here. First date of registration, last sale by registrant, last sale by retail, and expiry date of registration. So you are considered to be a retailer. So you have had possession of that Liquitox for 10 years past where it should be, roughly. So this is where you absolutely have to go and check that old products and make sure that they are not expired. All right, another one that I find an interesting database, this is fairly new to us. This one provides a great search tool, especially if so I had a PCO come to me earlier on in the year asking about, we get them all the time, but say someone comes to me and asks for a rodenticide block that can be used inside a poultry barn. This is a really good search way in which to search products. So I'm going to run through a quick example. So I clicked on the product search in this particular database, and I filtered it by site of use, by pest, by current or historical. I don't want any historical stuff because it's no longer registered, and the marketing type. So I'm going with commercial. So when I did that filter, it brought up a list of products that are current full registration that can be used based on the site, based on the filtering that was done on the previous screen. So if you click on the PCP number, it will actually open up a number of site use. So for in this case, this product was is allowed to be used in these types of locations. And here's one of the other searches. This is actually the targeted pests. So you know that it's good for rats, for mice, specific species. If you click on current reevaluations, the bromadiolone, along with all the other groupings of rodenticides, will be coming up for reevaluation in the next probably 2 or 3 years. So as you see here, it shows up as reevaluation special review, and it's pending. So a number of years ago, all the groupings of rodenticides went through a reevaluation. They are due to come through another reevaluation again because it's been almost 15 years since that reevaluation started. So I find this database actually very useful for doing refined searches to help people out and hone in on specific products. It is still your responsibility it's or the user's responsibility to open the label and make sure that will actually work for their particular application. Okay, couple of things. Storage of pesticides. Storage of pesticides is a provincial thing, but um, this is one of the concerns um, from my experience in doing the inspections with the RM offices. Storage, how you're storing your pesticides. Um, there's many different cabinets. There's many different ways you can store. Um, this is just an example, not the end all be all. Like I say, there's lots of different options, but what I find is that a lot of the rodenticides are stored in the back office because it's convenient. They might not be locked or secured or vented or anything like that. They are in fact locked because your office will be locked at the end of the day, but things you need to consider are your personal safety. And where would you store your bait blocks at home? Would you store them, under your kitchen cabinet, or would they actually be out in the shop? Consider those kinds of things again on your personal safety part of it. The storage is actually governed under the Provincial Act and regulations. So I would encourage you to Google the SAS Pest Control Products Act and Regulations. Section 7(1) to 3 cover off on storage and, specific things. Even strychnine, the risk of certain products being frozen. Something happens and product gets frozen in a shop. What's the ramifications of it? Agricultural users have the same things that they need to consider: what products can or cannot be frozen, how to store things. But again, for your safety, make sure that you're considering where you store them. Is it next to food that's going to be consumed? Is it next to your kitchen where you're actually, in and out of on a number of times during the day? So consider those kinds of things for storage. And here's just a document that I'll send to you after. It's a fact sheet on storage of pesticides. But again, it's a provincial regulation. We would encourage you to consider how you're storing them. Personal protective equipment. Talked about gloves. Probably the easiest, most simplest thing every user of a pesticide can use is making sure that you're wearing a chemical resistant glove with a chemical resistant rating. You can buy hundreds of gloves out there, nitrile, disposable, reusable, but not all of them are chemical resistant. So you need to find something on their packaging that says that it is in fact chemical resistant, or look for a beaker or a flask on the packaging indicating that they are rated for chemical resistance. Again, it's under your personal control whether you use a glove to protect yourself when handling them or whether you don't. It's totally up to you. But it's your own personal safety, and consider the effects of prolonged exposure. So just make sure you're using pesticide resistant or chemical resistant gloves. And another fact sheet I'll send along to you. So, in conclusion, the main messages I've tried to communicate today are, do an inventory of what you've got. Like I say, it's the stuff that's on the back of the shelf. Do a registration status and make sure that the pesticides in your operation are in fact registered. Wear your PPE, stop decanting, and consider the storage in your office. And again, reach out if you have any questions. And then just a plug, in the last RM Counselor magazine, I put in an article on environmental fate. I'm kind of hoping that we can continue with an educational piece on a regular basis so that we can keep you informed of things and stay tuned on things that are coming about, or just educational pieces. Again, contact information and any questions. So I guess I can stop sharing and we can open the floor for any questions.
Thanks, Pat. That was a lot of good information. As you said, if anyone has any questions, please feel free to submit those into the chat now. We will start off with the few that have already been submitted, as we only have a few minutes left here. The first one is, what about decanting and then putting the label on the bag?
Nope. Has to be sold in the container that it was originally distributed in.
Perfect.
Not an option. You're considered to be a registrant. As soon as you pull those blocks or place packs out of the container originally, you are now considered to be a manufacturer. So you would have to have a unique PCP number and go through the registration process.
Great. Thanks for clarifying that. This RM would just like to confirm something that was presented. We are in contravention from grabbing ramic place packs or resolved soft baits from the pail to distribute the bait. How do we distribute this product safely, hand out the entire pail to a ratepayer?
So I know it becomes a cost thing for an RM office. You need to go back to the distributors, whoever those people are, or whoever you use, and ask for smaller quantity packaging. You, I understand why you buy it because it's in a 5 gallon pail and it's cheaper, but the pressure needs to be put back on the manufacturer in order to get a smaller size, a 1 or 2 pound or 1 or 2 pound or 2 kg bag or bucket. You have to request that from the distributors. So not an easy answer, and it'll take a little bit of time for the market to correct. And the interesting part is the RMs in Saskatchewan are unique because you're the only, it's not the same in Alberta because they don't have a rat and mouse stewardship program like you do. Um, in Saskatchewan, it is extremely unique to you and this whole decanting thing. No other region does it, east or west of us. So it's unique to you guys. And it is definitely a contravention. Okay. A difficult thing, but the market needs to correct itself and you need to request smaller packaging.
We have another question here. Could instructions be printed for the use of the bait from the pail and given to the ratepayer with the products?
No, I think I answered that already. As soon as you pull it out of that original container, it is a contravention because it still needs to be sold in the original container. The only exception would be your SARM rat and mouse bait because the label, the secondary label is on that bag, which has all the use instructions. So the block doesn't have use instructions on it. The Rosal bait doesn't have use instructions on the bait itself, which means it is a contravention. It has to be the user that pulls it out of the original pail or bucket and uses it right from the pail or bucket.
Great. And I think that answers another question that was here. There's another question that says, does the actual product expire, not the registration, but the active ingredient?
No. Expire. A company can choose to discontinue a registration. There's a whole lot of things that can happen in the reevaluation. So Health Canada, PMRA does a reevaluation of a pesticide. Say the company chooses to discontinue it, there will be a phase out period. If PMRA chooses to discontinue it, there will be usually a 5-year phase out period. If the product, there's only one product that I'm aware of that has an expiry date, and it's malathion. It's not a product that you guys actually use. So every product, as long as you go into that registration status and it tells you it is continuing registration by not having 4 dates, if it's got 4 dates in there, it's on a phase out. And you need to pay attention to the retailer date. So it doesn't, they never really expire. They're always continuing registration as long as that registration status says. So they don't degrade over time. There is a first in, first out, probably important thing to do when it comes to rotating your inventory. You don't want old inventory. You don't want inventory for years and years. I guess the expectation is that you would bring in what you need from a distributor to use this year in your rat and mouse program. But as far as discontinued, it's really up to PMRA or the registrant who will make the decision whether a product's going to be discontinued or not. I hope that answered the question.
Great, thanks, Pat. And just to kind of regroup on the handouts that you spoke about during your presentation, we'll make sure to distribute those along with your contact information, a copy of this presentation today, and a copy of the recording to all of the attendees following today's session. So if anyone wants to kind of go back and rewatch anything, that'll be available to you. And with saying that, it's 11, so I think we'll wrap it up. Thank you so much, Pat, for taking the time to present to our members today. Thank you for everyone who's on the call. We hope you found the information helpful, and we hope you have a great rest of your day. Make sure to keep a lookout for SARM's upcoming webinars. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you.